Have you ever looked at your day and wondered where it went? You woke up with good intentions, to call your parents, to finally book that health check, to draft the first page of that long-delayed dream. But by evening, your hours were crowded with emails, errands, and little urgencies that felt important in the moment and strangely empty afterward. You promise yourself that tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow arrives already noisy, filled with sand before you've placed a single stone. Maybe it isn't that you lack time. Maybe it's that time slips through your fingers because the small things show up loud and early, while the big things wait quietly at the back of the room. The people you love rarely interrupt you. Your health won't send a calendar invite. Your purpose doesn't bang on the door. And so the day fills, and the quiet things, precisely the ones that matter most, go unfed. Stay with this story until the end. In a few minutes, a simple glass jar will rearrange how you see your calendar, your energy, and even your life. No hacks, no complex systems, just a picture you will never be able to unsee. Once you grasp it, you'll know what to do first, what to do later, and what not to do at all. And perhaps, for the first time in a long while, your day will feel full in the way that truly counts. It was a bright morning in a quiet university town. The lecture hall buzzed with the low murmur of students settling into their seats, notebooks open, pens ready. They expected formulas, theories, and perhaps another heavy chapter of management science. Instead, their professor walked in carrying nothing but a large, empty glass jar. No slides, no textbooks, just the jar. The students exchanged curious glances. What lesson could possibly come from something so ordinary? The professor was known not only for his sharp intellect, but also for his unusual way of teaching. He often believed that the simplest images could carry the heaviest truths. Today, he had promised them a secret about time. A secret that might help them balance the endless demands of study, work, and life. Many in the room leaned forward. They felt the tension between their ambitions and the small distractions that constantly stole their hours. Among them sat Daniel, a young student who excelled academically, but felt a gnawing emptiness. He was the type to chase every assignment, attend every club, and say yes to every invitation. Yet he confessed to friends that he had no time left for his aging parents or for the novel he once dreamed of writing. His days were full, but his heart was restless. That morning, as he watched the professor set the jar on the desk, something in him stirred. Perhaps, he thought, this lesson would reveal why he always felt busy, yet strangely unfulfilled. The room grew quiet. Everyone waited, and with a gentle smile, the professor reached into a bag and pulled out the first object. The professor held up a large rock, its rough edges catching the light streaming through the window. Without saying a word, he placed it carefully into the jar, then another, and another. Soon, the jar was filled with several big rocks, reaching the brim. He looked up at the students and asked, "Is the jar full?" The class chuckled. "Yes, Professor," several voices answered. It seemed obvious. Nothing more could fit. The professor only smiled, reached again into his bag, and pulled out a handful of smaller pebbles. He poured them gently, shaking the jar so the pebbles slipped into the spaces between the rocks. The students leaned forward, their eyes widening. Again, he asked, "Now, is it full?" This time, fewer voices answered, but still some nodded. "Yes, now it's full." Without hesitation, the professor took a container of fine sand and slowly poured it into the jar. The grains slid through the gaps, filling every hidden corner. Laughter broke out in the room. This simple jar seemed to defy their certainty. "And now?" he asked. Most of the students, still smiling, agreed that it must finally be full. The professor paused for a moment, then lifted a small pitcher of water from the desk. Carefully, he poured it in, and to everyone's surprise, the water flowed easily into the jar, seeping between the sand, the pebbles, and the rocks until the glass gleamed with fullness. The room erupted in murmurs and quiet laughter. At last, the professor placed the jar back on the desk and folded his hands. His eyes rested on Daniel, who had been watching intently, as though this demonstration carried something meant for him alone. The professor's voice softened, carrying both humor and gravity. "If you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never fit them in at all." The classroom was alive with murmurs, the students whispering about what the rocks, pebbles, sand, and water might mean. Some thought it was just a clever party trick. Others sensed there was more, but they couldn't yet name it. Daniel, sitting near the middle, felt his chest tighten. He thought of the pile of assignments waiting in his dorm, the part-time job he worked late into the night, the constant stream of notifications that swallowed his attention. His life, he realized, was filled with sand, small, countless particles that consumed every inch of his jar. The professor looked around the room. "Some of you are laughing," he said gently, "but think carefully. Isn't this how most of us live? We pour in the sand first. Trivial tasks, endless scrolling, meaningless arguments. Then we try to squeeze in the pebbles, the errands, the routine obligations. And when we finally look for space for the big rocks, our family, our health, our deepest dreams, there is no room left." His words fell like stones into the silence. Daniel lowered his eyes. He remembered the phone calls from his mother he had ignored because he was too busy. He remembered the notebook on his desk, its first page holding the outline of the novel he once dreamed of writing, untouched for months. He remembered the times he skipped meals, telling himself grades mattered more than his own well-being. Suddenly, the jar on the professor's desk didn't feel like a metaphor. It felt like a mirror. One student raised her hand. "But professor," she asked, "what if I truly don't have enough time? What if no matter how I arrange it, the jar is too small?" The professor smiled knowingly and tapped the jar. "The jar is your life. Its size will not change. The question is not how big it is, but how wisely you fill it. If you choose sand first, you will always run out of space. If you place the big rocks first, you will be surprised how everything else finds its place." Still, Daniel wrestled with doubt. Could it really be so simple? He imagined trying to prioritize his family, his health, and his dreams, while still juggling deadlines and responsibilities. The thought made him uneasy. He had always believed that success required sacrifice, and sacrifice often meant ignoring the things that mattered most. The professor's voice interrupted his thoughts. He poured the last drops of water into the jar and said, "Even when your jar seems full, there is still space for what refreshes the soul. A cup of coffee with a friend, a walk in the evening, a quiet prayer. These moments may look small, but they keep the heart alive." The class laughed softly at the mention of coffee, but many students sat back, reflective, as if the weight of their own jars had just become visible. For Daniel, it was more than reflection. It was a confrontation. He realized he had been living as though his worth depended on how busy he was, measuring life in tasks completed rather than moments cherished. Now, as he looked at the jar glistening on the desk, he wondered if there was another way. Could he truly reorder his life? Could he dare to place the big rocks first? The professor did not press further. He simply left the jar where it was, letting silence fill the room. The struggle was not in lifting stones or pouring sand. It was in the heart of each student, deciding whether they had the courage to change what they placed into their own jar each day. The professor let the silence linger until every restless shuffle in the room stilled. Then he stepped closer to the jar, his voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. "These big rocks," he said, tapping the jar gently, "are the foundations of your life, your health, your family, your deepest values and dreams. Without them, no matter how much sand you pour in, your jar will feel empty. If you lose your health, what good are the pebbles of routine? If you neglect your family, who will stand with you when the noise fades? If you abandon your dreams, what will all your busyness mean?" The students sat frozen, pens hovering above notebooks, as if they dared not miss a word. Daniel's eyes were fixed on the jar, but in his mind, he was picturing his parents sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for a call that never came. He felt a pang of guilt, but also a spark of clarity. Perhaps it was not too late. "The pebbles," the professor continued, letting the smaller stones trickle through his hand, "represent your job, your obligations, the daily duties that matter. But only after the big rocks have their place. They keep life stable, but they are not life itself. Too many people confuse pebbles with rocks, and then wonder why their hearts feel hollow." He lifted a pinch of sand and let it slip through his fingers. And this is the noise. The countless small things. Gossip, distractions, mindless entertainment. The endless scrolling that swallows hours and gives nothing back. If you allow this to fill your jar first, you will wake up one day and realize the rocks you once cherished have no place left. The class was silent. Even the air felt heavy. Then the professor smiled and raised the jar so that the morning light illuminated its contents. But when you choose wisely, when you begin each day with the rocks that matter most, you will find space for everything else. And even when it seems full, you can always pour in the water, the moments of laughter, friendship, and rest that refresh your soul. Daniel felt his throat tighten. For months, he had convinced himself that ignoring his health was necessary for his future, that missing family dinners was the price of ambition, that postponing his dreams was maturity. But now, staring at the jar, he understood. He had traded his rocks for sand. The professor's final words were almost a whisper, yet they struck deep. Remember, life will always offer you sand first. It will always call you to what is urgent but not important. The choice is yours. To let the noise crowd your jar, or to begin each day with what matters most. If you don't place the big rocks first, you may never place them at all. The truth settled into every corner of the room, not as a theory, but as a revelation. For the students, and especially for Daniel, the image of that jar would linger far beyond the lecture. It was no longer a classroom exercise. It was a blueprint for living. When the class ended, the students left the lecture hall quieter than they had entered. Some carried their notebooks, others carried questions, but all of them carried the image of that jar. Daniel lingered for a moment, eyes fixed on the glass that still glistened with water. It no longer looked like an experiment. It looked like a mirror of his own days, crowded, fragile, yet full of possibility. As he stepped out into the sunlight, he breathed differently. For the first time, he thought not about deadlines or assignments, but about calling his mother that evening. He thought about taking a walk, about dusting off the notebook where his dream of writing still waited. The rocks, he realized, were not distant treasures. They were here, waiting for him to choose them. And isn't that true for all of us? Life never grows larger, but it grows richer when we place the right things first. You do not need more hours. You need clearer priorities. The jar will always tempt you with sand, but you are not powerless. Each morning, you have a choice: to let noise rush in, or to set down the stones that hold your life together. So, when tomorrow arrives and the world comes knocking with its distractions, remember the jar. Remember the professor's smile. Remember that there is always space for a quiet coffee, a gentle walk, or a phone call home. And above all, remember this: if you choose the rocks first, your jar will not only be full, it will be meaningful. Don't let the small things steal the music of what matters most. Value your time, cherish your health, protect your family, nurture your dreams. For when your jar is filled with the right stones, life itself becomes a vessel of purpose, steady enough to hold joy, love, and peace. If this story of the empty jar and the big rocks touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might be drowning in the sand of endless busyness, someone who needs the reminder to choose what truly matters. And if you want more stories like this, simple but powerful lessons that can shift the way you live, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we bring you a story to inspire, to encourage, and to guide you toward a life filled not with noise, but with meaning.